Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Frank Rausan Pereira. Since you are here, I would like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, hit the bell icon and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter to get incisive content. The Bharata First team is also running a daily quiz. The winner will get to interview me. The program is called Hot Seat. Details are in the description of this video. There is also a contribution link for those who would like to contribute to keep this content alive. Do continue to show your love and support because I need it now more so than ever. Now, India's relations with Russia are time-tested and strategic and are not influenced by ties with other countries. External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said on Thursday. Bagchi was responding to questions during the weekly news briefing on Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's visit to Pakistan after a trip to India and Moscow's offer to supply military equipment to Islamabad. Lavrov's visit to India provided a good opportunity to renew and review our special and privileged partnership, and a broad range of issues were discussed, is what the External Affairs Ministry said. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze how to balance ties with Russia. Joining me on the program today are Major General Ashwani Siwach, retired defense analyst, Ashok Sajjanhar, former ambassador, and Harsh V. Pant, head strategic studies, Observer Research Foundation. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Ambassador, let me start the program with you first. Let's first understand and try and analyze, where our ties with Russia stand. What are the key takeaways of the Russian foreign minister's visit to India?
This was an important visit, I would say. I think there has been, over the last 1 year or so, I would say that there has been a few ups and downs as far as relations are concerned. I think the most significant of that was that we didn't have the summit, the India-Russia summit at the highest level, which has been happening since 2000. We've had every year, notwithstanding the uh, difficulties or preoccupations of the leaders, but they have made time to meet and take the relationship forward. So last year, this could not happen. Of course, both the sides said that it was because of COVID-19 that the Russian president could not come to India, but the summit will take place sometime very soon. So one of the reasons, of course, was to discuss and finalize the arrangements for the summit. We had our foreign secretary visiting Moscow also in February 2020, and this would have been the subject of discussion at that time. So this was one, and I guess another aspect, one in speaking at one of the premier think tanks in Moscow, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, had said that India was somehow being snatched away from by the West, particularly US, trying to set up a front against China. And this was a rather uncharitable comment. This was rather uh, uncomplimentary that India could not decide its own foreign policy. In fact, the foreign office spokesperson had to come out and say that India determines its own foreign policy independently based on its own interest, and that relations with one country are not really dependent on relations with other countries. So I think there were a few issues that needed to be discussed, but the visit was useful because both the ministers could meet, and as the at the joint press conference, it was mentioned whether it is defense, space, nuclear energy, whether it is the connectivity through the international north-south transport corridor, whether it is cooperation of India in the Arctic, whether it's maritime connectivity from Chennai, Vladivostok, because you would recall that the summit in 2019 had taken place in Vladivostok when Prime Minister Modi had been invited as the chief guest at the Far East Forum. So all these issues were discussed, and there was also in terms of a boost to the Make in India initiative as far as defense items are concerned. It's not only export to India, but also progressive manufacture as far as India is concerned. And Lavrov made it clear that Russia is the country that supplies high-tech equipment to India. And so there were a number of issues that were discussed trying to take the relationship forward. But I think still there were a number of factors because Russia, the foreign minister, Russian foreign minister, left Delhi and he went to Islamabad. Earlier we used to talk of the hyphenation between India and Pakistan that the West used to indulge in, and here we have that Russia is engaging in this sort of hyphenation exercise, and this was his visit to Islamabad after a gap of 9 years. So I would say that there are good opportunities. We are taking our relationship forward. But the last comment I'll make here, Frank, is that it would be useful to recognize that India and Russia, the strategic relationship and understanding that both the countries used to have earlier during the Cold War period, particularly, that seems to be lacking, and the relationship seems to be becoming much more transactional in nature. Both the countries need each other. It's not that only India needs defense equipment, defense supplies from Russia. Russia also needs India equally much, and we can discuss that going forward. So it has become much more of a transactional partnership rather than being a strategic relationship. Frank.
Absolutely. Points taken. All right. General, let me come across to you now. Let's talk about the defense and strategic importance, really, as far as Russia is concerned. Your thoughts on that, and how important is Russia to us, and vice versa, from a defense and strategy point of view?
Absolutely correct, Frank. As far as Russia is concerned, India and Russian relationship are very old, and one can say they were a strategic relation where India was purchasing almost about 70% and above military equipment from Russia, and possibly the complete you can say the aircraft which are fighter aircraft series of big R we have bought it from Russia. So is the tank T-72, T-90, also our air defense system and artillery. So we were totally dependent, in fact, on Russian equipment. And because there were two, three reasons. One is that the Russia was coming forward to give us the weapons of high technology, which was not been given to us by Europe and US. Second thing is that it was on a very competitive rates. But over the period of time, it has been realized that the relationship which we have grown between India and especially in US and other countries, we are start getting a better weapon system even from them. And remember that from US, we are now start getting the latest high-tech weapon, especially after this four basic foundation which has been signed between India and US. That is your Limio, Comcasa, and the latest one is Beka. So we could get C-12 Hercules, C-13J. Then we could take Apache attack after we got M777 ultra light Howitzer. So the aim of telling is that the weapon system which US was not giving, other than the NATO country, it has offered to India and also to transfer the technology and make in India concept. No, this is the game changer. And this has put a tremendous pressure that we have now starting going for purchasing weapon not only from Russia, but also now enlarging our inventory and taking about 15 to 20% weapons from US and also going to Israel and going to France and going to Japan. So this has slightly changed the weapon system which we are totally dependent on Russia today, we are now getting from, especially from Western countries, with the high tech technology and transfer of technology. But still, we are dependent on Russia. Our maintenance and spare parts are coming. Remember that S-400, which is a best air defense system in the world, we have gone for it. It is a deal of $5.4 billion with a five regiment which we are taking. Remember that US is putting a sanction on this called Card Casa, countering America's adversary through Sanction Act. the Turkey and the Turkey and China has bought it, and it has put a sanction. Notwithstanding that the sanction may be imposed, we have gone for S-400. The reason is simple, because this is the best air defense system available in the world. And America was trying to put pressure on India not to go for this. In addition, or alternatively, they were giving us the hard system, which is terminally high altitude area defense system with Patriot missile, which they have deployed in South Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Taiwan. Yet we have gone for S-400. So the point today is the relationship between India and Russia are also transitional. What investor was telling, they are more realistic. Now we are. It is a multipolar world. It is a world order which is changing very fast. You like it or not like it, we are drifting toward, say, US, and the Quad has become the key pillar with India, China, Japan, Russia, and US having a strategic partnership. At the same time, the Russia is now gone more closer to China. The basic reason is it is the US Russia relations are also not to the best, and so is the US China relation. So the enemies are friends, and they have now become together. And now with this, they have got Pakistan, Iran, and to some extent Turkey forming a nexus. So one side it will be a quad along with these four countries and European countries. Other side you find Russia and China together. Along with that, you will find even Iran and Pakistan, to some extent Turkey. This is a new world
Right.
order. You like it or not like it, it will happen. But India has to play its card well. For us, that not only US is important, strategically very important now, but at the same time we have to have a very good relation with Russia, because we still have 50 to 60% equipment coming from Russia. And remember,
Sure.
in two three things, no one in the world has helped us as much as the Russia has helped us when we needed the most. One is the nuclear technology. Now also, as far as the nuclear power plant which have been placed by Russia in Kundakalam is going on, and the new one is being now placed it even in spite of COVID-19. That is very
Right.
important thing. The another thing is, after 71 war, when the restriction was put by the West, but India still keep on getting the weapon system from Russia. So therefore, we will not do anything which will hurt the sentiment of India and Russia. If you remember that when the Russian foreign minister has come to India, he has met his counterpart, but the Indian prime minister has not met him. You know, you can read in between the line. There are different thought process. Some, it may be that the prime minister was busy in the election, but it also means to say that the India has not liked the idea of the foreign minister is going from India to Pakistan, because
Sure.
India wants the relationship between India and Russia to be the best. Because if the relationship improve between Russia and Pakistan, it is not to our liking and not to our interest.
Points taken, General. Let me take the points that you're making forward and go to the professor now. Professor, if you look at it from a balancing point of view or a balancing act point of view, how do we strike a balance between the countries that we are taking defense equipment from? Clearly there's a lot of there's a lot going on in the defense space, and everyone is vying for a similar kind of a position and wants to be a part of this particular market. So from that perspective, when there is so much of pressure from all these countries on India to pick up their defense equipment, how do we kind of play the balancing act?
Frank, every strategic partnership is a product of its times. So to look at India-Australia relationship today through the prism of Cold War is a mistake, and to think that India-Russia relationship perhaps can continue as it was continuing in the past would also be a mistake. Clearly, there are new fault lines, there are new imperatives, there are new strategic priorities for both sides. In the context of defense, most people would know that India, since the end of the Cold War, has been trying to diversify, and for good reason. We can't, just as today there is a recognition around the world that you can't be over dependent geo-economically on one particular country. It always makes sense to be less dependent, or to be to have diversified sets of partners. So when you say balancing, I think that sense of balancing has already come in post Cold War. As the general was saying, during the Cold War, of course, Russia was giving us, Soviet Union was giving us all kinds of critical technologies that the West was not willing to supply. But that was then. Today, we live in an environment where everyone is vying for Indian market. Indian market is big enough, and what is sort of what one side looks at as a pressure, the other side can look at as a leverage, right? You leverage your potential market also in your engagement with multiple stakeholders that want to come in. So I think for Russia also it is important to understand that India is not the India of the Cold War. For India also it is important to understand that Russia of today is not the Soviet Union of the past. And only if we have realistic expectations from each other will we have a realistic relationship. Because clearly, as Ambassador Sajjanhar was pointing out, the divergences are very clear. The divergences are out in the open. The fact that Russia wants to not have us at the Afghan peace process, America wants to have us there, is an inversion of this whole idea of who's a partner and who is a friend. The fact that Russians are now hyphenating the relationship is also reflective of the changing times. The fact that Russians speak the language of the Chinese on so many issues is also a bit concerning to us, because clearly what is the most important strategic challenge today for India? China is. So if you are looking at it even from defense perspective, a lot of defense sharing that is happening between Russia and China should also concern us in India. So diversification that way is an important process. It has already started, and my assumption would be that it will continue, because that's the best thing that India can do, Indian defense forces can do, and Indian defense forces themselves have been saying that if we want cutting edge technology, we also need to look elsewhere. So you have America, Israel, Europe coming up as big partners, and therein I think lies the real story here as to how one can look at the Russia relationship. One need not always look at the Russia relationship as one where we are at the receiving end, where we are receiving things from Russia. We are also giving a lot in return, and I think there should be some reciprocity. There has to be some accounting for what India accounts for in the Russian calculus, because the wider paradigm I think is very significant to understand. Russia's foreign policy approach today is largely through the prism of its anti-West, anti-American perspective, whereas for India, the most important challenge today, tomorrow, and thereafter will be how to manage China's rise. And these two at the moment do not converge. And if they do not converge, then it would be unrealistic to expect that we can have the kind of relationship that we enjoyed with Soviet Union during the Cold War. Clearly, these are new times, and I think defense in particular, which was your question, has been evolving in that direction in any case.
Talking about new times, Ambassador, is this also a challenge for Indian diplomacy? Does it make it a little more difficult for Indian diplomats to handle such a situation and such a challenge?
No, absolutely it is. I think we have to be very nimble-footed, of course, in terms of whatever might be the minefields that might be lying ahead, and whatever might be the challenges. As has been made amply clear by Professor Pant. China is the biggest challenge as far as we are concerned, and for us, notwithstanding the fact that we would like to maintain very progressive, forward-looking relations with Russia. But there are certain limitations, because we've been seeing that increasingly Russia has been speaking, has been really serving as a mouthpiece of China, and to increasingly, to an extent, also Pakistan. Meaning, I would draw your attention to, let's say, in December 2017, when we had the RIC meeting, when Lavrov and the Chinese foreign minister was here, and they were having a meeting with Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, and Mr. Lavrov was talking very, very strongly, advocating that India should join the Belt and Road project, giving no credence to the fact that India's sovereignty and territorial integrity was being destroyed by China going through the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So we've seen increasingly that Russia has been speaking in this manner, even more recently, when it has, it totally disregarded that China had committed aggression against India. It had violated all the 5 agreements that we had signed together, and it had killed 20 of our soldiers. And notwithstanding all that, it has been talking about that this is an Asian NATO that is being constructed, having no sort of understanding of India's concern as far as the threat from China is concerned. So, speaking about this, yes, we have tried to maintain this balanced relationship with Russia and with the United States, because these are the two main protagonists. You would recall that in 2018, on the sidelines of G20, India had met the leaders of Japan and United States, Japan, US, and India. And also at the same meeting, we had met the leaders of Russia, China, and India. And the same configuration took place also in Osaka in 2019. So India has been basically following a foreign policy of based on its interests, and in terms of the issue based, wherever are the issues converge or coincide, wherever our interests converge, we will work towards with those countries. And this is exactly what we've been doing. It has worked so far, but now we have seen last year particularly has seen a large number of changes geostrategically, geoeconomically, geopolitically. And in that context, the fault lines have become much more visible and much more severe. So, in that sense, the challenge for India's diplomacy is huge. But I think India's stature has also risen. India's contribution not only to global economics but global peace and security has also grown. So I think we are going to make our choices based on our interests, and in both in terms of maintaining our territorial integrity, sovereignty, but also peace and security, and also our economic growth and development going forward. Frank.
Absolutely. General, I'd like to bring you in here very briefly. As far as Russia and China are concerned, how much of a concern is that to India? Is there a problem there? How do we address that?
Absolutely correct. See, Frank, no doubt the collusion between Russia and China is not to our interest. Not only this, but also to some extent, even Russia and Pakistan. Now, first, I just touch upon why Russia is interested, that it is coming very close to Pakistan now. The reason is simple, that the interest of Russia in Afghanistan. No, because it knows it that Pakistan has got the best of the relation with Taliban, and so is the Russia. And Russia says that Taliban is a very important part of Afghanistan society, and they should be the one which should become a part of interim government. Whereas India has been trying to tell that whatever solution should come, it should be basically for an independent and democratic Afghanistan. So here the interest of Russia and Pakistan are convergent as far as Afghanistan is concerned, and not to our liking. This point must be understood. It is Russia which was trying to dictate that India should not be part of the mechanism in which the peace process is being discussed as far as Afghanistan is concerned. It is only Joe Biden administration which has put the pressure, and we are now in that the same platform. Having said so, as far as India and China is concerned, as far as India looking for next 20 years, China is going to be a big threat to us, not only on the land border, also in the Indo-Pacific. And the reason that we have become a part of Quad is not that to it our liking. There is a compulsion. Remember, in Indian Ocean today, the Chinese Navy is growing from strength to strength. It is any point of timing having about 5 to 6 nuclear submarines. It will also have in future aircraft carrier, because it has got the maximum ship in the world. So the growing presence of Chinese Navy is a cause of disturbance as far as India is concerned. Hence, we have now become a very active member of Quad, because the only way to curtail this aggressive and assertive attitude of China is to become a member of Quad. Because the three principles on the Quad which it was formed, it says the free and inclusive and open Indo-Pacific with three pillars: that freedom of navigation, rule-based international order, and maintaining territorial integrity and sovereignty of all nations, including a smaller island. This is the cause of concern as far as India is concerned, the growing Chinese Navy footprints in Indo Pacific and Indian Ocean. And that is why it is we are trying to be much closer to the US and also become a part of a Quad. And we are inching. It should be formalized. It may in time to come, not now, that it may be militarized in case there will be a counter pressure from Russia and China. This is point number one. Second thing is, as far as India is concerned, after what has happened in Eastern Ladakh, we have realized that depending and believing China will be the biggest mistake which we were making it. In last about 10, 20 years, our focus was that we were economically becoming stronger. Our, 80 to 90% billion-dollar is the trade between India and China. The dependence of China on Indian market was huge. And hence we ever thought that there can't be a full-fledged war between India and China because China is so much dependent on the Indian market. That myth is no more there because we have realized in Eastern Ladakh we were almost on a point of full-fledged war. And having said so we have to develop our eastern border and northern border. We have to now make an infrastructure development, capacity building, modernization of our defense forces. And in case we have to do it, we need more help of the West as far as the US is concerned. Because the US has now promised us not only to give the state-of-art weapon system, transfer of technology, and make in India concerned. As I was telling you, M777 ultra light howitzer, the state of art weapon system available, not only they have given us, it has also transferred technology. Mahindra Defense is now manufacturing. Same way through
Sure.
South Korea, we are taking K9 Vajra self-propelled gun that will be manufactured by L&T. So hence, the point today is that if we have to counter China, we need America help and we also need other countries help. And to that extent, we are now being a part of Quad. We are also coming very close to Israel. We are coming very close to other European countries like France and United Kingdom just for purchase of weapon system. So the ground
Sure.
reality says very clearly in another about a decade, China is going to become a big military threat to India. The only to counter is develop your infrastructure, build up your capacity in northern border, modernize your defense forces, and also improve your infrastructure and capacity in Indo-Pacific by modernizing your navy, have more nuclear submarines, also have a third aircraft carrier. That's the only way to go forward to counter China in future.
Absolutely. Professor, let's also talk about another aspect now. We're talking about how the Russians have gotten closer to China. Now, let's not forget this was necessitated after the Crimean annexation and how the West dealt with Russia. So this is more of a, compulsion as far as Russia is concerned. And the ties with the other countries also seems like a byproduct. Same with India as well.
Yes, see, India's position, Frank, from the very beginning has been that if Russia and the West can get along, then there is nothing like it because it also changes the larger balance of power picture globally, right? If you, at the moment, we are in a situation where two of the major adversaries of America, Russia and China, are coming together. Let's also go back to the balance of power politics being practiced by major powers in 1970s. One of the reasons Cold War was won was that Kissinger could break the Chinese away from the Soviet camp. So clearly, I think not, there is a certain degree of short-sightedness in the West at the moment where they seem to be unable or unwilling to break this relationship between Russia and China. And there is a certain element where the kind of projection of the values question onto Russia and China equally means that you are unable to break this relationship, which also means that on a country like India, which in an ideal world would like stable ties, would be very, very are quite high and are growing. And you would also recall that Trump was in favor of um, uh, strong relations with Russia. But of course, due to the unique situation that propelled him to office, as well as the domestic debate in America about Russia, it virtually became impossible for him to move any further. So on the Russia question, so clearly in terms of domestic politics, in terms of the Russia, Western ideological landscape, any kind of rapprochement with Russia in the short term looks very unlikely. Biden administration has taken a very, very strong position vis-a-vis Russia. In fact, they very unfortunately, but and unstrategically, but the West is increasingly putting China and Russia as two of the most important strategic challengers. Now, anyone who knows the two countries would tell you that Russia and China are not in the same league. Russia is many things. It's not, but it's not a great power in the classical sense of the term. It's not a comprehensive national power today. There are major vulnerabilities, most importantly economic, that Russia is facing. So if you're looking at it from the long term perspective, West would be West perhaps is doing is very short sighted. But for a country like India, you have to deal with the world as it is, not as you would hope it is. And therefore, while much as we would like to see the Russia-China engagement breaking, and the West making an outreach towards Russia, I don't think it's happening in the short to medium term. So therefore, Indian foreign policy will have to deal with the challenges of what it means for India. How do you balance, as we have been discussing over the last few minutes, how do we balance those interests out? And from our perspective, can we ensure that can we tell at times our American friends that, look, some of the things that you are doing perhaps are counterproductive to the larger question of the Indo-Pacific also. So when you say, for example, that we will impose sanctions, CATSA sanctions on you because you are buying S-400, I think there is a good reason to explain to the Americans that this is something that India needs, and this builds India's capacity. This is good for regional stability, and this is good for managing China. So I think there are ways of going about doing this, and India has been successful, given by the fact that we have not yet faced the brunt of CATSA so far. So I think in that sense, Indian diplomacy has been nimble enough to move around some of these pieces of the dice. But I would think that this is clearly a challenge going forward, given that the West is not in a position, or not seemingly not in a position, to make a substantive outreach to Russia.
Absolutely. Time to get quick closing comments now from all my panelists with the best way forward, starting first with you, Ambassador.
Well, best way forward, I think we need to do more of what we have been doing. As I said earlier, also, we have had excellent relations with all the major powers, barring China. Now, and China also, it has started basically last year. There's always been some sort of a latent tension and stress in the ties, but it really came out in the open. So there'll have to be a new paradigm as far as our bilateral ties with China are concerned. And what China had been thinking, like it has been able to do in the past with other countries, that irrespective of the security relations, irrespective of the whether there is peace between the two countries on the borders, maritime or land borders, it can continue to have business relations as usual. And I think that is what they had expected from India also. They've been trying that, leave the border issue aside and let us have relations as far as commerce and economic and investments are concerned. But India has very clearly told China that that will not do. So I think our fundamental threat and fundamental challenge is going to come from China. And how do we leverage our relations with the other countries? We've spoken considerably about the United States. I agree with the statements that in the short term, Mr. Trump wanted to go ahead, but the Congress stopped him in the United States. Right now, it is both the White House as well as the Congress which are against having better relations with Russia. So in the short term, I don't think there is any hope. But as far as India is concerned, I think we can continue to have strong ties with Russia to the extent possible, because I think there is latent distrust and suspicion at the growing power and footprint, increasing footprint of China, not only in the far east of Russia, but also in Central Asia. And I think we need to leverage that, because sooner or later, China is going to step on Russia's toes. So while Mr. Lavrov might have said that Russia-China relations today are the best that they have ever been, I think going forward, there are possibilities of problems and stress and tension between these two countries. And I think India needs to be ready to take advantage of that. So our relations with Russia and with other partners, whether it is the Quad or it is West Asia, I think we need to work on them, continue our dialogue, and see, try to make the best out of those ties. Frank.
Absolutely. General, very quickly, best way forward?
Yeah, Frank, today is a new world order. India has to be realistic. It is very clearly said that there are no permanent friends and enemy in international arena. It is your national interest which is permanent. So having said so, we have to do a balancing act both between US as well as Russia. Both are important to us. We have to make sure that we have the best of the relation with US and also with the Europe. The Quad and the strategic four uh, foundation agreement which you have signed will be stand to us good start. At the same time, Russia is our strategic partner, which offers about 60 to 70% of weapons. Our old weapons require maintenance. We need a very good tie with Russia, and in case if that is the case, we have to do a very a good balancing act. As on today, our relationship are growing very fast with US, and especially the Quad becoming reality. It looks as if we are drifting toward US and forgetting about Russia. I don't think that may be a correct statement, because we have to do a balance act in the sense the Russia is also very important. Remember that when we are going to Chabar, which is going to be operational in May now, it has been announced that the north-south corridor, which is coming basically a multimodal transport corridor coming from north to south, is basically to improve the trade and business between India and all European countries, especially in Russia. So India needs Russia. Russia needs India because India provides them a big market, and India needs US, and the US needs India. So if you see this, we have to do a balancing act. But at the same time, where we have a problem today is we must be very realistic. Is China. The growing power of China is going to be a big threat in India, and the only way to counter is to improve yourself in a manner that the Chinese start respecting us, and therefore that needs it improving your infrastructure and capacity in the northern borders. At the same time, modernize your defense forces, make it lean
Sure.
but make it more modern. At the same time, Indian Navy will play a major role in next decade in Indo-Pacific. Pay more
Hmm.
attention to your navy, have a third aircraft carrier, have a more nuclear submarine to counter Chinese footprints in Indonesia. Overall, one can say that this is a testing time, a fluid situation. We should be very wise enough to understand who is your friend and foe. And as what we have said is, there are no permanent friend. We must keep on changing as the situation carrying on. For us as of today, US and Russia both are important partners. At the same time, a challenge will come from China, not only now, in another about a decade or so.
Right. All right, Professor, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Frank, I just think that we should be realistic about what Russia possibly can do for us and what we can do for Russia. And I think we need to keep the channels of communication open, as I think this visit signified, that it is important at the highest levels of leadership in both countries to remain engaged so that our grievances are aired out and our differences, are clear to the other side. So clearly, if we have been able, if we are time tested partners, as we like to say, then I think we should have the ability to be able to convey our differences to each other and to let those grievances not become an obstacle in building on our convergences, which, as we have been discussing, exists in so many areas where we can work together. If that is possible, and if the Russians can understand the gravity of the situation on the China front as far as India is concerned, I think there are still signs of this relationship continuing to be relevant for India for the foreseeable future.
All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that there are new fault lines in the ties between India and Russia. Moscow has gotten closer to China and Pakistan, and that's a reality that we have to deal with. Relations between Russia and Beijing are not always going to be like this, as they have their own problems. We have to be nimble footed and swoop in whenever their ties degrade. We have to be pragmatic in our approach and change with the changing times. Russia is important to us, and so are our other partners. We have to engage with all our partners and strike a balance. These are challenging times for Indian diplomacy, but we'll have to be up to the task. Once again, thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter. The Bharata First team is also running a daily quiz. The winner will get to interview me. The program is called FRP in the Hot Seat. The details are in the description of this video. There is also a contribution link for those who would like to come forward and contribute to keep this content alive. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.